Okay, it's gonna be a while before my shirt dries, so I thought, let me take this time and cover a topic that's gonna take a while, but a very important topic: relative pronouns. Now, first, let me just say this. Relative pronouns are way more important in German than they are in English. And I'll explain why, and you'll see why later. Secondly, they're actually quite easy. We practically know all the forms of the relative pronouns already. You'll see that. Also, they're extremely logical in their use. What makes them difficult for us, or for English speakers, Americans at least, is that we don't pay attention hardly to relative pronouns. We're getting to the point where we have one relative pronoun in English, that. I mean, there's that, which, who, whom, but even in the presidential debates where a who was called for, candidate used that. Well, that's the man that was, what? Yes. That's incorrect, but it's taking over. And maybe one day, almost certainly one day, it will be seen as correct. So because we're so lax about the use of relative pronouns in English, not even needing them, and then using that so indiscriminately, we're not conscious of the connections and the functions, the connections of the relative pronoun to its antecedent and the functions of the relative pronoun in its clause. And if we're conscious of those two things, relative pronouns in German are very simple. So the first point I want to make, well, I guess I ought to make clear exactly what a relative pronoun is. A relative pronoun is a word in a second clause of a sentence that refers back to a word in the first clause. Okay, it repeats essentially the word in the form of a pronoun as opposed to repeating the word itself. So that is the man who is dating my sister. Now, if I were to say that's the man that's dating my sister, nobody would know. It's not a big deal. That's how careless we can be in English. But anyway, whether I chose who, which would have been correct, or would be correct, or that, it refers back to the man in the first clause. That's the relative pronoun. And in German, you've got to be careful about the relative pronoun you choose. Why? Because the relative pronoun gets its gender and number, that being singular or plural, its gender and its number from its antecedent. If I'm referring back to a masculine antecedent, man, I need a masculine relative pronoun. If it's a woman, die Frau, then I need a feminine relative pronoun. If it's das Haus, then I need a neuter relative pronoun. Now, it's all der words, not just, of course, ones that refer to people. So, das ist die Decke, die unter der ich schlafe. That is the blanket under which I sleep. Die Decke, and I shouldn't have chosen a dative relative pronoun. Das ist die Decke, die ich gestern gekauft habe. That is the blanket that I bought yesterday. The die is feminine, and die ich gestern gekauft habe is also feminine. So it gets its gender and number from its antecedent, but it gets its case from its function in the clause in which it appears. It gets its case from the function in its function in the clause in which it appears. So if I say, that's the blanket that I bought yesterday, I bought that yesterday, it's the direct object. So I would need an accusative relative pronoun. In fact, in German, because it refers back to die Decke, I would need an accusative feminine relative pronoun. Boy, this cap feels funny. My cap is in the laundry. It's being washed. It's in the washing machine. I gotta wear this stuff. All right. So what are the relative pronouns in German? It's not a whole bunch of new things we have to learn. They reflect, they mirror, and for the most part are identical to the definite articles. Masculine relative pronouns, nominative, der, dane, dame. Nominative, accusative, dative, der, dane, dame. The definite article for the genitive masculine is des. The relative pronoun is dessen. What about our feminine definite articles? Die for nominative, die for accusative, der for dative. It's the same thing. It's the same thing for relative pronouns. Nominative, accusative, and dative are identical. The exception is der is the genitive definite article, deren is the genitive relative pronoun. And we see the same pattern for neuter. Das, dem, dessen. Des is genitive, dessen is genitive relative pronoun. And the plural die. Now the plural definite article for the dative is dane. The relative pronoun is denen. And the genitive is der. And the relative pronoun is deren. So you essentially know the relative pronouns already. Now, let's see how that works in a sentence. Remember, helfen is followed by the dative case, right? The object of the verb helfen is in the dative case. So, here's the first sentence I have. Ist das die Frau, die dir geholfen hat? Ist das die Frau, die dir geholfen hat? Is that the woman who helped you? Die Frau is neuter, is feminine. The relative pronoun who helped you refers back to die Frau over here, the relative pronoun. And so I need to choose a feminine relative pronoun. It's the subject of its clause. Who helped you? Who helped? So I choose a nominative feminine relative pronoun. Ist das die Frau, die dir geholfen hat? Das ist der Mann, den du suchst. Da ist der Mann, den du suchst. There is the man for whom you are looking. It would be correct in English, probably acceptable now to say who you're looking for, and one day, that you're looking for. Ugh. Now, in German, it's got to make sense. In English, we're just lax about it. In German, it's got to make sense. Da ist der Mann. There's the man. Du is the subject of the second clause. You are looking for, now remember the verb suchen means to look for. There's no need for a preposition. So the object of suchen is the direct object. It's accusative. That is the man you're looking for. Den du suchst. Oh, if we change to look for to seek, for example, it would be easier to see. There is the man whom you are seeking, right? You are doing the looking for. Den Mann is the direct object. You have your relative pronoun den, and that's an accusative relative pronoun. Ich suche das Mädchen, dem du danken sollst. Ich suche das Mädchen, dem du danken sollst. Okay, I'm looking for the girl whom you should thank. Now, why dame? First of all, despite the fact that it means girl, das Mädchen is a das word. And second, danken is another verb whose object is always followed by a dative case. So I need a dative object in that clause because danken is my verb. I'm looking for the girl whom you should thank, dem du danken sollst. Those are relative pronouns in sentences. Now, another point that needs to be made is, unlike in English, which I don't know whether it's technically acceptable or not, but it sure is widely used, and in fact, when you don't do it, it sounds a little snooty, could dramatically shrink your circle of friends. And that is ending a sentence with a preposition. You cannot end a sentence with a preposition in German. It's not like English. Is that the guy you're going out with? That's fine in English. I mean, technically correct. Is that the guy with whom you are going out? But come on, let's be realistic. But in German, that is exactly what you have to say. That is exactly what you have to say. You cannot dangle a preposition at the end of a sentence. Now, why am I making a big deal about that? You will see that in the second and third of these sample sentences. Why and how that's used as a relative pronoun. Okay? So, but one example in the plural, those are the children whose parents are never home. It's plural and it's genitive. We haven't seen either one of those yet. Das sind die Kinder. Those are the children. Now, anytime your relative pronoun means whose, you need the genitive. Anytime your relative pronoun means whose, you need the genitive. And which genitive form you pick depends on your antecedent. In this case, our antecedent is plural. So I must pick plural genitive relative pronoun. Those are the children, deren Eltern nie zu Hause sind. Whose parents are never at home. Deren Eltern, whose parents. By now you may have noticed that in the relative clause, it's a subordinate clause, the verb, the conjugated form of the verb always goes to the end of the clause. The conjugated form of the verb always goes to the end of the clause. Now, look what happens. Here's what I was talking about with never ending a sentence with a preposition. Okay? Is that the boy you're waiting for? That's what we would say in English. In German, you would have to say the equivalent of, is that the boy for whom you are waiting? Because you cannot end that sentence with a. Now, the German to wait for is warten auf plus the accusative. And so I need an accusative. And is das der Junge? Der Junge is masculine. So I need a masculine accusative relative pronoun. I need a den. So, where do I have that? Okay. Ist das der Junge, auf den du wartest? Is that the boy? Ist das der Junge, auf den, for whom you are waiting? Once again, warten auf plus the accusative is to wait for. And then what's the next sentence? Ist das Kind of das Kuli, mit dem du schreibst? Mit is a dative preposition, always under all circumstances. Dative case follows the preposition mit. Is that the pen you write with? In German has to be reconstructed because you cannot end with. Is that the pen with which you write? Is das der Kuli? It's der Kuli. And mit is followed by the dative. What's my dative masculine relative pronoun? Mit. And so here I have it. Ist das der Kuli, mit dem du schreibst? Okay. Here's another example. Now this one I put it on a separate sheet because when the relative pronoun, the prepositional phrase relative pronoun, it refers to a place, it frequently gets replaced with the word wo, where. So, for example, and I want to show both of these sentences. When I was in school, I always would say the first example, express it the first way. Hier ist das Hotel, in dem ich arbeite. Here's the hotel in which I work. In is a two-way preposition followed by the accusative or the dative. In this case, in is followed by the dative because it shows no change of location. If I'm going into the hotel, it's accusative. If I'm in the hotel, it's dative. I work in the hotel, it's dative. Hier ist das Hotel, in dem ich arbeite. That is how I would have expressed it. Now I find myself more and more expressing it more like this second sentence. Das Hotel, what do I have here? Hier ist das Hotel, wo ich arbeite. Hier ist das Hotel, wo ich arbeite. Instead of in dem, I use o. When it refers to a place, I use wo rather. When it refers to a place, you can use wo. And then my final sentences here. This is a much more unusual situation. I'm pointing it out because it exists. It doesn't happen that often. So if you master everything else but this, you're in pretty good shape. You're in very good shape. Monika kommt nach Mitternacht nach Hause, was mir gar nicht gefällt. Monika kommt nach Mitternacht nach Hause, was mir gar nicht gefällt. Monica comes home or is coming home after midnight, what I don't like at all, what I don't at all like, which doesn't at all please me. In that case, gefallen translating is to please works really well, which doesn't at all please me. When your relative pronoun is referring to the entire preceding clause and not just one element, when the antecedent is the whole clause, as in this case, Monica is coming home after midnight, then your relative pronoun is was. Okay? Now, unlike English, relative pronouns can't be admitted in German. In English, you could say, that's the man I saw. That's the man I saw. The relative pronoun would be whom, actually. That's the man whom I saw. You're not going to, I don't know, you won't hear that too often in English. You might hear, that's the man that I saw. That's the man who I saw. Or very frequently, we just forget the relative pronoun altogether. And that's part of our problem. You're still at the stage where you think in English. And if you're thinking, that's the man who I saw, that's the man I saw, you don't have a relative pronoun. You have to have the relative pronoun in German. So it would be, das ist der Mann, den ich gesehen habe, because it's whom I saw. I is nominative. The direct object is whom I saw. It's got to be accusative. They're referring back to der Mann, so the relative pronoun is den. Das ist der Mann, den ich gesehen habe. Okay? That should complete our presentation, or my presentation here on relative pronouns. I think I still have a while to wait till my shirt is dry, and then my cap still has to get dried. Oh my goodness, I don't know. But anyway, that's it for us today.